Namaskar and welcome to this exciting show again with a very famous author, a friend, and a researcher. And also, we are discussing Sattology, debunking mythology. We we want to we want you to think in terms of we are not here to prove anything. We are not telling you what to think. Just we are giving you information so that you can make a viewpoint that between truth and untruth there is one is the truth is only one, and there can be many variants of untruth. And through these discussions consistently we are trying to bring out the best, and it's up to you to make it decide what is best for you or what you understand. If you have any questions, you can always post us on YouTube when the video goes live on YouTube. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Nilesh Neelkanth Oak.
Namaskar Aditya ji.
So the Saraswati River is respected as a version is in Mahabharata, and most of the Vedic sages have done meditation across Saraswati River, on Saraswati River, and many times you see Mahabharata and also mentioned in Ramayana also. Saraswati River. So this river is like a common link between ancient age and modern age also. And today also somebody was telling me in Rajasthan they found Saraswati also. And the characteristic of Saraswati River is the water is always hot. So there are a lot of hot springs in Rajasthan and other places, and people assume that it's coming from Saraswati River. So this is the opening statement. So what do you think about the historicity of Saraswati from the Rig Veda perspective?
Okay. So what you just described in your introduction is very much correct. In fact, Saraswati can become a tying rope that connects the different stations of Indian civilization. So what we will do in today's discussion, we will start with our times. We will go back all the way to Rigveda and beyond. And then we will come back again, so like we will go against the current, you can say the time current, and then we come back along with Saraswati, like a grand Saraswati to no Saraswati, what we have. So if you want to start today, so I'll just give you a quick highlight, and then you can ask specific questions if you like. Right now, there is no Saraswati, like you mentioned, like somewhere they found something in Rajasthan. Of course, when they dig deep water holes in the Rajasthan desert, they have to go like 40, 50 meters down to actually trace this path of Saraswati, because a lot of sand has come and whatnot. When they date that water by different techniques, there are ways to say the date, meaning not just the pure dating, you can actually date it, but based on isotopes and whatnot. But you can also find out the source of that water, as to say, is it just a groundwater? Is it just the water coming from like a monsoon water? Or is it a mountain water, meaning like Himalayan mountain water? And based on that, they can say this. But let's just, in my first opening statement, let me go up to Mahabharata. You mentioned that Saraswati is mentioned in Rigveda a lot of times. I mean, it's full of descriptions in Rigveda. In Ramayana, it is definitely mentioned few times, much fewer times. And again, in the Mahabharata, it is mentioned many more times. Okay, and we will see why even that is so. So this is not a coincidence. But if we go backwards, I mean, from our times go backwards. So right now we have no Saraswati flowing per se. Just as approximate location of Saraswati, what we can say is that the modern day Ghaggar Hakra river that goes through Haryana and goes through Rajasthan, and then it disappears into the desert of Rajasthan. In fact, it's not a perennial river. Only during the monsoon season there will be water into it. But that was approximately the path. There are hundreds of different studies to trace the exact path of Saraswati, and we know that now. There is no confusion whatsoever. In fact, Saraswati bifurcated afterwards in Rajasthan. Like one branch went, the distributary went towards like what is modern day Pakistan, and another went towards Gujarat. So we also know that. So there may be more distributaries, but two broad ones. Just quickly, I'll mention on Mahabharata and give it back to you, which is this. You said it very well. In the Mahabharata times, there are Mahabharata text itself has 100+ different descriptions of Saraswati. And it's a very mixed descriptions. Like in some places, it's flowing beautifully with good amount of water. Other places, it has disappeared into the sand. And in some places, it is coming out of the sand. And those all locations have become important. And still in additional places, it is flowing underground. That is, these are the descriptions in the Mahabharata. And one more is that in the Mahabharata times, when they are discussing, like Balarama's Tirtha Yatra or other sages telling Pandavas about the importance of Saraswati and different Tirtha Kshetra, they are describing it as like a past glory, meaning that those Tirtha Kshetra were great places long time before Mahabharata. So that is the sense we have. And I have dated Mahabharata at 5561 BC, which is 7,500 years ago. So we are talking of this scenario. I'll give it back to you. Then we'll go to Ramayana. Then we'll go to Rigveda.
No, very interesting. In fact, when Yudhishthira Maharaj and in the first Vanvas, when he goes out for a year, for a year he goes. Actually, they were going around because they were scared that Duryodhan may hurt them.
Correct.
Then it is very clearly mentioned that near Garhmukteshwar, near Delhi, you go, I think you go towards the west, towards Kurukshetra.
Okay.
And there they bank on the river Saraswati. And then I don't know, somewhere Kamyak 1 is somehow related to that location.
Yeah.
And it is said that all the Brahmanas, they emptied the entire forest from the Kandamul. And so that is one mentioned in Mahabharata. But Ramayana, I'm less aware of that. Where is that mentioned? So please, if you can connect, that will be awesome.
Right. In fact, in Mahabharata, it is mentioned like, there is this research, research, two researchers together, like Megha Kalyan Sundaram and Manogna Shastri. Okay, they have presented in Swadeshi Indology Conference of Rajyo Malhotraji multiple times actually. What they did is they essentially looked at every single Saraswati reference that they could find from Mahabharata text. And they found more than 200 specific references related to Saraswati in Mahabharata text. It is that rich. Now, your question, where is it in Ramayana? Ramayana, actually, it comes very few times. Okay. In fact, one that very clearly I remember, other times it may come as a name. But in this case, very specific location of Saraswati, and that's why it's very important also for Satlaj, is that when Bharat is coming back from Kekaya after Dasharath has passed away, and these messengers quickly go to Kekaya, they go day and night travel. They go through day and night travel and go as fast as they can reach Kekaya in 3 days. But that is like an extreme fast, like a marathon runner, you can say. But when Bharat is coming back, of course, he's a prince and now more valued prince. He's the only prince available there, let's say, and with the army and whatnot. So it takes them 7 days. Okay, when he's coming back, there is a description of they crossing Satlaj, and a very beautiful description. I'll mention it here. Is that Satlaj is flowing in the westward direction. Okay. And it's very important for Saraswati. I will mention that in a next portion of this particular talk. But then they cross Saraswati, and it's a very fast flowing river. So that is where the description of Saraswati comes. Then they cross Yamuna. What that does is it also tells you the exact location of Saraswati in the Ramayana. It is there in Rigveda. It is there in Mahabharata. It is there in Ramayana. So Kurukshetra is explained as the land between Saraswati on one side and Drishadwati on the other side. So the geographical location and marking of Saraswati is extremely consistent based on our modern studies, but it's also consistent, what we have found, with what is stated in Mahabharata, what is stated in Ramayana, and what is stated in Rigveda.
Now, I'll connect it to the even Megasthenes and Greek historians. When they mention Harakswati, and they do mention that there is a bigger river, Saraswati, flowing. So even if you say 1,150 years after Krishna left the planet, that time also it was flowing.
Yes, that it was flowing. Also, what happened is that the people who are migrating from India to outside, just like, there is a Baroda or the New York is here, or Boston is there in North America after the places in England. Same thing, like the traveling parties and the migrating people out of India did take these names, or because of cultural exchanges and the great importance of um, these civilization, they took the name that Saraswati became Haravati by the time it went to Iran. Okay, and some time ago we discussed the old Irish maps, and
Correct.
just I was looking for that map to send it to you. And for example, Ganga is a generic name for any river body in an Indian context, like just like Akash Ganga, the Milky Way is also called a Ganga, right? Any flowing river, any flowing structure like that. And so there is actually, in the old Irish maps, you will find a river that is named as Gangai. So yes, so the names did go outside. Now quickly what I'll mention is, uh, for example, the Rigveda mentions very clearly multiple times, like Giribhya a Samudra, meaning this Saraswati, which starts into high mountains and then goes all the way to the ocean. Or they say Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame, Saraswati, the grandest of the grand river, the grandest of the grand. And they are saying this in the context of when Ganga existed, Yamuna existed, Satloj existed, and all the five rivers of Punjab existed, Sindhu existed. In that context, they are still saying grandest of the grand river is Saraswati. So when we look at our modern data, when I say modern data, especially data that is collected in last 100 plus years, 150 years, and even more specifically, the data that is collected, I would say, since 80s. So that would be what? That would be like a 40 years, last 40, 50 years. What that shows is a quickly this picture, that the Saraswati that we know definitely started, it may be even earlier, but definitely we have a definite evidence that it was flowing as a Mahasaraswati, as a grandest river, sometime for at least for 100,000 years, for 1 lakh years. Okay. Then when as the time passed, around sometime between 50,000 and 40,000 BC, that is the modern research, um, Yamuna split from Saraswati and started flowing eastward. Now, granted, there will be distributaries of Yamuna which still continue to pour water into Saraswati, but main stream of Yamuna split it. It started going eastward, and it made Ganga, and this happened sometime between 50,000 and 40,000 BC. That is very useful for dating of Ramayana and so on. But that also tells you why this Mahasaraswati started becoming Saraswati. So one mainstream was gone. Now Kurukshetra area has 5 rivers and the Saraswati itself. So that was there. But those are much smaller compared to Yamuna. Then in 15,000 years ago, from our times, if you go back 15,000 years ago, Satloj turned sharp west near Ropar or Rupanagar. And that is another evidence for us for the dating of Ramayana, because Ramayana dating cannot go before 15,000 years, and it cannot go before 50,000 years, because in Ramayana you have Yamuna meeting Ganga multiple times, multiple descriptions, and Ramayana you also have a description of Satlaj going west. So what I'm saying is, the simple purely descriptions of river Saraswati and its tributaries and distributaries also support and also make us understand the timings of Rigveda, timings of Ramayana, and timings of Mahabharata. So that's what you see. And Rigveda, so the grand Saraswati of Rigveda, there is no evidence of that any time in the last 10,000 years. So I want to turn it around and say, so if you have to look for the grand Saraswati of Rigveda, we must go a minimum of 10,000 years, and definitely 22,000 plus years, actually 24,000 years, 22,000 BC, to see the Mahasaraswati that is described in Rigveda, like Giribhya Samudra or Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame, Saraswati.
Was it flowing into today's Hindu Mahasagar, or was
Uh,
it going up?
yeah, it was flowing into Arabian Sea, so you can call it Sindhu Sagar or Saraswati Sagar. If Saraswati is the grandest river that is coming there, you could call even Saraswati Sagar if you like,
Yeah.
or Sindhu Sagar. And while just you mentioned that, that's a good question. It is also very interesting. Now let's come to the last part of Rigveda, which is 10th mandal. Not because it's last mandal, but it is on many based on many different research criteria. Like Srikant Talagiriji had done wonderful work, and many other. Actually, both Western, Eastern Indologists also agree that the 10th mandala is the last mandala, last portion. Also, we have Shantanu Devapi mentioned in it and so on. But the Nadi Sukta that appears in 10th mandal, 10.75 Nadi Sukta, it describes 19 rivers. Again, that's a very beautiful sukta to study because it starts from the east. It gives the Ganga and Jahnavi and I mean all the river names and goes all the way to Afghanistan, the rivers of Afghanistan, which is now it's Afghanistan. It was all Bharatvarsha, all the way to India and whatnot. But what is interesting is that 10.75 talks about all rivers, including Saraswati, but then it gives you a very clear indication that Sindhu was the grand river at that time. And now we should ask the question, so Saraswati was a grand one time. Well, now what is it that happened that made Sindhu the grand river? And one simple answer is, can you guess what the answer would be? What would have changed the status of Grand Saraswati from a Saraswati, the grandest river, to Sindhu, the grandest river, by the time of a Mahabharata? Because the 10th mandal is around the time of Mahabharata when
Because
Vyasa
it
recast it.
vanished or it disappeared.
Saraswati disappeared, correct. Now I will tell you why Saraswati also existed in Mahabharata times, because of the intensification of monsoon. This is a paper of Sarkar, Anindya Sarkar 2016, and many other researchers, where intensification of monsoon happened 7000 BC and it lasted until 4500 BC. That is the time when Mahabharata war happened. And then again it dried out. But no, that is not the reason. The important reason is, remember I said 15,000 years ago, Satlaj, who was feeding the waters to Saraswati, suddenly sharply turned westward, which now we can go and see at Ropar or Rupanagar in Punjab, and sharply started flowing westward. Now, where did it go? Satlaj went sharp westward and made Sindhu.
Wow.
That made Sindhu the grandest river. So that happened after 15,000 BC, and it is recorded in around 6,000 BC, like the Mahabharata times.
So what a like a connection right there. So there is a popular saying, when we say Gange cha Yamune cha Godavari Saraswati Narmada Sindhu Kaveri Jale Asmin Sannidhim Kuru. We use this mantra many times. Gange cha Yamune cha Godavari. So was there a point that that Godavari, Saraswati, Kaveri, all these rivers simultaneously existed?
Yes, indeed. They all existed simultaneously. In fact, the one that disappeared in a way is a Saraswati. I mean, as the things would happen. And then some people confuse that. For example, they think, oh, because of the Himalayan melt and Himalayan mountains and stuff like that. No, I mean, we still have a perennial Ganga, perennial Yamuna, perennial Satlaj, all the rivers of Punjab, Sindhu, they're all perennial. So that can happen. So the disappearance of disappearance of Saraswati was for tectonic reasons, geological reasons. Why the plate sort of came up and the Yamuna started going eastward, Satlaj went westward. I mean, you can easily imagine that, this flowing and something, a landmass say came up in a very simplistic way. So the rivers now have to go somewhere. So one went to the east, one went to the west. Satlaj went to the west, Yamuna went to the east, right? But the bottom portion, the central portion or central south portion, like Narmada River, for example, or Godavari, Tapi, Krishna, Bhima, Kaveri, I mean, they were not affected at all. And if you look at them, right from Narmada or Chambal and Shon and all the way down, they are not, or these rivers did not originate into what you call ice-fed mountains. They are from a mountain area where there is no ice. So it is due to the monsoon. And yes, these rivers did exist for a very long time.
So see, these rivers have held such a strong dharmic value, very strong dharmic value.
Yes.
Was it, and based on research, we all know they all come from Brahmaputri, they call them. Right. They are respected as daughters of Brahma. And there are also like the other reasons, not just humanity reasons. I think the reverence for them was their connection with some divinity. So how
Uh-huh.
do you connect these rivers to personalities?
Okay. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but what we do know as a phenomenon is that is like all the powers, for example, something that is life sustainers or life giving, they develop the character of their own. And it's a good question, great question, by the way, Aditya. Uh, you can see the development, the deification, if I can use that word, the deification of river Saraswati. Um, you can see that, of course, not so much in Ramayana. You see that to a decent extent in Mahabharata, but right inside Rigveda, you see the deification. Just to give you an idea, for example, Rigveda has 10 mandalas. Okay, so 10 mandalas go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And that is what we have today is a Shakal Samvita, what we call Shakal Samvita. Rigveda had many Samvitas, many branches, like many books on physics kind of thing. What has survived is a Shakal Samvita, one of the disciplic succession from Vyasadeva. Okay, so, but that's what we have. Now, what Srikant Talagiriji as a relative chronology has shown, it's a wonderful work, is this. The oldest mandalas, I mean, I'll literally read out the sequence, okay? The oldest, I mean, from my memory, because I love it, what he has done. As a relative chronology, I do not agree with his absolute chronology because he's stuck in like 3500 BC and afterwards, That's what he considers the whole timing for Saraswati, which does not stand the scrutiny of any scientific evidence that I just shared with you. Like Saraswati is there from 100,000 years. Okay. But the relative chronology work is very impressive. So if I have to say the sequence and then I'll make further branches. So oldest one is a 637. These are a mandala names. 637, then 42, then 5, 8, 9, and then after a long gap in between, mandal 10. Okay, and the suktas of the first mandalas are all over, right from the oldest to the youngest. Okay, that's there. Now you can further branch this and say 637 as a one group, then 42, then 589, and then a long group, and then 10, and a one on its own. Now I went into the details, but it is for a reason, to answer your question, that the deification, like why we look at them as a Ma Saraswati or goddess Saraswati, and of course goddess Ganga, goddess Yamuna, and so on, right? So if you look at the descriptions of river Saraswati into the oldest mandalas, like 637, for example, you find this is where this description comes. The grandest of the grand reason, the Naditame Ambitame. Naditame Ambitame comes in mandala 2 and 4. But I'm talking the 637 is like Giribhya Samudra, or it is so fast. The river was flowing so fast that the some of the mountain tops, the not the ice, even the stone, that it will cut with its fast water, and it will carry on the surface of the water. Imagine that, meaning it's like a solid stone or whatnot, but the flow is so strong that it will carry on the surface of the water like lotuses. That those are the descriptions come into this 637. The point is, nowhere, or if there is any, very exceptional, you find a deification of river Saraswati into the oldest mandalas of Rigveda. So in 637 you don't find much about the deification, but once you get to 4-2, and then of course afterwards 5-8-9 and all the way to the 10, now Saraswati has already become a goddess. Okay, you see the Devi, hey Devi, please come here, don't flood the area, please nourish us, and all those descriptions. So what I am saying, I'm speculating, I'm not an expert in that field, is a deification of something happens over a period of time. Okay, so that's what happened, but that also tells you how old is Saraswati and how old is Rigveda. So Rigveda even has this whole historicity of a Saraswati, from a Maha grand river to a river that is in the memory of a people as a very auspicious river, which no longer exists, or if it exists in a very inferior form, meaning much smaller than even Sindhu Nadi.
So there is a conversation of Bhishma
Hmm.
and Yudhishthir, and in which actually Pulastya,
Hmm.
Yudhishthir, where Pulastya, Yudhishthir Maharaj asks him that Pulastya Rishi, please tell us the Tirtha Sthan.
Hmm.
And Pulastya mentions around 1100 places.
Hmm.
and where
Hmm.
he goes. And one of the places is Saraswati Banks, and where
Huh.
he mentions a temple
Hmm.
in Kurukshetra of Ajanu. I
Hmm.
forgot the name. So there also Saraswati River is mentioned. So it shows
Yes.
the exact geographical coordinates from
Hmm.
Meerut, district Meerut, and I can say which is today Meerut is Hastinapur,
Yeah.
to the west of Meerut, then little south, and then turning east, west, and then going up to where it is Rajasthan is.
Correct.
So like there is a bend over there which goes straight and
Yeah.
then flows south.
Yes.
So
Yes.
do you think that this path has been traced so far in the
Yes, actually, it is stress. So what you described the eastern boundary of this Saraswati area when you mentioned Meerut or Hastinapur. I mean, that's where Ganga is, then Yamuna. And so Yamuna at one point was practically completely flowing into Saraswati.
Hmm.
In fact, so you can think of like, if you think of the Japanese fan, like that they will have. So one extreme is Yamuna on the east side, and the west side was a Satlaj or Shutudri. That's kind of, that is that whole valley in between all the rivers that you mentioned, multiple rivers in Kurukshetra area, and that they came together. Just north of Shirsa. What is Shirsa now in Haryana?
Yeah.
And I was fortunate. One of the PhD student at the Kurukshetra University, Rakesh Tanwar, hmm, a wonderful friend of mine. He's right now, I think, doing PhD, if I remember correct. And he gave me 2 volumes of books. Some I don't forgot the author's name. I have them. Um, Beautiful. I mean, they have done such a work, and I think in some ways they need to be brought out into the light. Meaning, yes, they are published, but nobody is paying much attention. What they've done is they have. You mentioned like these 11,000. You mentioned what Pulastya. Okay, I don't remember that, but I remember Markandeya Rishi talking about it in the Vanaparva, Aranyak Parva. Lomasha Rishi is also talking about the Saraswati into Vanaparva. And of course, then Balram Tirtha Yatra, again, you have many more descriptions, right?
Right.
So they are all over Mahabharata. What these, who I don't know whoever the author or researchers are, they have actually made a point to identify particular Tirtha Kshetra, specific Tirtha Kshetra, just like a Bhishma Nirvan place is there on the bank of Ogavati. Now
Correct.
there is no Ogavati river. Now there is a lake there, because the river is kind of gone, just like Saraswati is now disappeared. They have got such a wonderful documentation. It's very amazing. And if I can take a digression and quickly mention it, there is another wonderful individual, Lina Mehendareji. I don't know if she's working now, but she was an IS officer, and we have traveled together, I mean, to Kurukshetra, and she mentioned something and she's working on it, or she might have completed that project. Wonderful. What she said is, even to make that connectivity in India, she said, what if all these Tirtha Kshetra that we have, of course related to Saraswati that she was talking, but it applies to all the Tirtha Kshetra around the India. What if when we drive on the road, now we have these all highway networks coming, and so when some Tirtha Kshetra detour comes, the mention of that Tirtha Kshetra detour is given in different languages. And by that, I don't mean every place it is written in all languages. But how nice it would be, say, suppose somebody is driving in Maharashtra and someone from Tamil Nadu or Kerala. And when he sees a place location to say Pandharpur, I'm just using that as an example, or Siddheshwar, Solapur, right? But that name is written in Tamil, or that name is written in Bangla, something like that. The person will be say, hey, wow, I mean, I can read it. And otherwise also people will read English. And, it really has an effect. And she has actually accomplished that in certain areas. So the reason I mentioned that is I suggested taking all these Tirtha Kshetra of Kurukshetra region related to Saraswati and said, if that can be done with these different languages. And what she told me is that not different languages, but I think Haryana government has taken some initiative and have started identifying and naming those Tirtha Kshetra. But there are many. And the beauty is that particular books, I will try to find those. I have those 2 books. I'll find it sometime. they have that particular Tirthakshetra, they have the corresponding verses, either from Mahabharata, either from Ramayana, either from Rigveda, or from the Puranas, linked there with corresponding personality. Very, very, very impressive job. And again, we have many true researchers like that, and we don't even know about them. I mean, I felt so bad that I don't even remember their names right now. And they have done this wonderful work. So I think these works needs to be brought out, in a mainstream publication.
No, actually, Saraswati is not only an enigma but an inspiration also. Uh,
Absolutely.
because the Saraswati banks have nourished a lot of sages, a lot of
Hmm.
thinkers, and I
Hmm.
call sages as thinkers mostly, Rishi,
Hmm.
Muni, we call them, and like the great historical work. I think Rig Veda was
Hmm.
written on Saraswati banks most of the time,
Yes. Yes.
and different ashramas or different rishis were there.
Correct. Correct. And yeah. And for example, when we look at the Purva Vrittam in a Katha Yukta form, like, Saraswati splitting into 100 streams for Vasishta, for example, like that. What you find, our modern research, modern INSAT research, satellite type of research, actually next time or some other time, I will share you the map. You can actually see, and because Satlaj, remember, Satlaj was Saraswati, like,
Yes.
because Satlaj was the mainstream of Saraswati, so was Yamuna and all the rivers in between. You can see do you know why the name Satlaj or Shatudri? That literally means the one which has 100 streams.
Wow.
And these are distributaries of Satlaj. And I can show you on the map how it has spread like into 100 different things. And now you can, now we don't know the dating of that, but now you can connect that with the katha of Saraswati splitting into 100 streams for Vasishta. So none of this is a myth. So to appropriate for the name of your show, Sattology, none of this is a myth. I mean, we would have said, what is this? Saraswati is spreading 100 streams for Vasishta. Well, actually, it did. Now, it may not have done for Vasishta. That may be the metaphorical way of preserving the stories. That's why we say, Purovrittam Katha Yuktam Itihasam Prachakshate. That's how we remember it. But it's a fact. And we have the evidence of that, which has only emerged in last 30, 40 years.
So there is a Balram also pulling
Hmm.
Yamuna,
Hmm.
hundreds of streams,
Hmm.
and towards the southwest. And if you look at the southwest Delhi, it's
Hmm.
raised up. And
Yeah.
right off behind that is actually the actual place of rivers Yamuna.
Yes.
Or to some extent, you can say that it was called Yamuna because Yamuna was a tributary, but
Hmm.
actually it may have been Saraswati actually.
That is also true, na? Correct. Just like Satlaj was nothing but Saraswati, Yamuna was nothing but Saraswati, right? And then it split, then it went eastward, and Drishadvati, which was a distributary of Yamuna, which continued to feed waters. And so Mahabharata times you have a Drishadvati from the east, and Saraswati from the west, which must be distributary of a Satlaj possibly or other rivers, and that's how the Kurukshetra area was defined.
Right.
Couple other quick points. One is, now you mentioned Bhagwan Balaram, and his instrument is a halar, right? The plow,
Yeah.
and so related to the agriculture or changing the path of the thing. So that's very symbolic. And we have this story of possibly Balaram changing the path of Yamuna, right? There is another story. So we don't know exactly what it would be, but we can easily imagine possibly like they putting a dam and they putting the canals for agriculture purposes, and so on. Then another mysterious thing for me, I mean, I have not found the answer, is Bhagirath and a Ganga. Now, my friend Yashudip Devdar on his YouTube channel 21 Notes, like it's dedicated to Ramayana, does a wonderful job. He has one episode, like 10-minute episode on Ganga and Bhagirath, and it's worth watching. But it is a sort of a mystery to us, like as to exactly what Bhagirath did with respect to river Ganga. That something is a very worthy of investigation. And many people have very casually, lazily, tamasic fashion, without doing much research, have said a lot. But it needs a research. And one of the challenge of that research is because river Ganga exists right now, the research sometimes becomes challenging with the water and all that. Whereas Saraswati, I mean, too sad that we lost Saraswati, but because it's no longer there, I mean, it's a land mass. The research becomes easy. Like if you want to dig a hole 40 feet, 40 meters, 50 meters, it's not that big deal. We can get the sand samples. And Aditya, do you know that these rivers, this is a 2017 paper, Singh and others from IIT Kanpur and many universities from UK. And even one before that, Clift, the Clift paper 2012, and even some before, that each river, just like, if you sign your name on a check, bank check, you have your own signature, we will say. And if I write your name, Aditya Satsangi, it won't be exactly the way you sign it. These individual rivers, based on the kind of stone structures, granules that they brought, they have their own signature into those stone structures. And that is what is used by this Clift and others and Singh to decide when Yamuna was meeting with Saraswati, when Satlaj was meeting with Saraswati, when Satlaj separated from Saraswati. Very, very fascinating. And that can also be done possibly for Ganga. The challenge is because Ganga is flowing right now, some research. But I'm curious that somebody or a group of people take this Bhagirath and Ganga research connection to see what it was, because it's there. And we don't know the details, but there is a great mystery surrounding that thing.
No, we can always assume that the Kapil Muni was doing tapasya near Sundarbans in Bengal.
Yeah.
And where the Bhagirath delivered 60,000 sons of Sagar Maharaj, his great grandfather. It's like it was the fourth generation. And also a very beautiful story, Janu. Janu Rishi's ashram is still there in Allahabad.
Okay, very good. Yeah,
Janu,
that's why Jahnavi, huh? That's why Jahnavi.
Janu, he swallowed the whole Ganga. And then, so he had to again do tapasya so that he can release as a daughter. So on one condition, they released that he will make Ganga his daughter. He gave the name Jahnavi. And that's how she continued flowing. So with the path, we can definitely make out. Now coming back to River Saraswati, which has been an enigma, and reverence and venerance, all those things associated with that. The Saraswati River, it actually became the source of Dharma for many sages over the years.
Right.
And you rightly connected from Mahabharata to Ramayana to Rig Veda. So, do you think that the traditions maintained Saraswati enigma or the attraction towards Saraswati River?
Okay, well, again, it will go back into the deification. For example, why Saraswati became the Vak Devata, like the goddess of knowledge. And you said it, you hinted, and you even very explicitly said it, which is that the Veda was written on the bank of Saraswati, right? That could be true for many other writings, if not exactly bank of Saraswati, but a bank of a river, like Valmiki's ashram was on the bank of a Shona river, they say, or whichever river. So I think the river stream, not just agriculture, not just the nourishment, the physical nourishment, but they became the centers of mental nourishments. And that's why these Kashi, for example, Kashi is like the center for education, center for learning, right? So that came into being. And I think that just like deification of somebody as a goddess, similarly the importance of this so Saraswati as a devata for Vak, like a Vak devata, the goddess of learning. I think that very much came from it. So it is not, and so therefore we find the sukta or other mantra also that they say, please nourish our body, but it says, please nourish our buddhi, like a brain, and please nourish our mind, let our bad thoughts go away, and so on. And so if you can connect that, we can connect that with, it says, mano, all ashramas, right? So it says, what is that? Sarva ashrama prayuktoyam niyama kulanandana madbhava sarva bhuteshu mano vak kaya sanyama. So, you need to control three. One is the mano, the mind. The vak is like a buddhi, because that's how the knowledge comes. And then the kaya, which is a sharir. And it was all nourished by Saraswati. So they connected with it, I think, because of that. So not a surprise that it became the goddess of a language, goddess of words, goddess of knowledge, and so on.
No, you're absolutely right. And you mentioned that the characteristics of rivers, like Yamuna is black and
Hmm,
Ganga is a little bluish and greenish.
hmm, hmm,
And in the Triveni, Saraswati, when they say Saraswati mixes there,
hmm.
in the Triveni, the water is warm,
Warm. Okay. Interesting.
not cold. And because
Yeah.
Ganga is very cold,
Hmm, hmm,
and Yamuna is little less cold, but the
hmm,
water is black.
hmm,
And they flow side by side, and it's a miracle to watch from the boat. If
hmm.
you stand right at the junction, you will see the difference.
Interesting.
So, and
Interesting.
because the hot water is on the top,
Hmm.
so the water will be hot on the top, and and then you can see the colors.
Ah.
It's
Interesting. I have to go to Prayagraj. I have not been, not been to. And you said you actually go inside a boat to close to that
yeah, you
location,
have
no?
to go in the boat in the middle of
Hmm.
Triveni, then you can see the
Right,
difference.
right,
And
right.
nobody knows which direction the third source is coming from.
Ha,
But
ha.
you know that the force is coming because the water is gushing in.
Right, right,
It's a clean water.
right, right.
You can drink.
Yeah, yeah. And just on that point, I'll mention something. So because that is a frequently asked, you did not ask the question, but that's a frequently asked question. They say, okay, so Saraswati was in the Haryana, Punjab area and Rajasthan area, and why it is mentioned there, like in the Prayagraj. One thing is, of course, when suddenly the Saraswati, no, maybe not suddenly, but when Saraswati disappeared, and that was like the main lifeline for the whole Hindu civilization, right? I mean, it started disappearing. See, in fact, after 22,000 BC, it became substantially smaller. Okay, still very huge, by the way, but substantially smaller in comparison to what it was before. Like, we have evidence, very physical evidence, that it was as wide as 22 kilometers in some places.
Exactly.
22 kilometers, 15 kilometers was like average.
Average.
Even Kalibanga in 22,000 BC, which is way downstream in a way, it was like a 15, 8 to 10, 15 kilometers wide in Kalibanga. But it suddenly went down after, become smaller and smaller after 22,000 BC. Then 15,000 BC, it would have become further smaller into this. So when we see this journey, so what happens suddenly? I'm not saying it's happened suddenly, but over time, suddenly Saraswati disappeared. But it is there in all of our ancient narratives. It is there in Rigveda, it is there in Ramayana, Mahabharata, all the Puranas. But it's not there for us to celebrate. Just like Krishna's Dwarka went inside the ocean, we have to build it on the bank, wherever now we could. Same thing happened, and therefore, if this is my conjecture, therefore there was a river, and recently they found one river, by the way, between Yamuna and Ganga near Prayagraj. There was a paper from some institute, I forgot now. So that river could be that, one that. But something else happened that you may know. When the original Saraswati disappeared, people, they don't want to give up that memory. And so many Saraswati rivers came up. I mean, in my area, western part of Maharashtra, we have one Saraswati. Okay. But so the impact of Saraswati on the human psyche, the Indian psyche, was so much. Then we have, right now, you may know, we have one Saraswati in the Uttarakhand state.
Yes.
Nothing to do with this grand Saraswati. And then if you go to Gujarat, you have few Saraswatis. So I think they came out because we want to still retain that memory. And this is my conjecture. I think that's how these many Saraswatis afterwards came into being.
Yeah. Thank you so much for today's discussion. And I think there are many questions there for viewers to ask it on the YouTube channel.
Please. Yeah.
You can ask directly over there, or you can email Nilesh Oak directly. You can search out his name. His website is there, very famous. So thank you all for joining. And there are some of the American viewers don't understand what is Saraswati. I think that's a river, and that it was an ancient river, 15 to 20 kilometers wide, which is 9 to 12 miles wide, approximately. And then, so thank you so much, Nilesh. I did not know it was so wide.
Yeah.
It was an eye opener for me.
Yes. Sometimes we can show the maps in future. The exact maps of these things. Very
But
good.
as usual, a great show, and viewers keep watching. and we'll be back again with some very interesting topic next week. Namaskar.
Namaskar.